My name is Ezinne, and for 3 years, my life was a movie that nobody wanted to watch. Every night played out like a scene I could never rewrite. The same fear, the same tears, the same silence that swallowed my screams before anyone could hear them. When people saw us together, they saw a picture of love.
Ezinne, the quiet wife, and Kunle, the handsome banker with a steady job, good English, and a charming smile. They saw him opening car doors for me, holding my hand at weddings, dropping comments like, "My wife is my queen." They saw perfection, but they never saw the bruises under my sleeves. They never saw the red marks that makeup couldn't hide, or the way my hand trembled each time I heard his car horn at the gate. It didn't start with slaps. It started with control. Soft words that sounded like love, but cut like chains. "Don't wear that skirt. People will look at you." "Why did you post that picture?" "Who are you trying to impress?" "Why are you laughing too much?" "Are you flirting?" At first, I thought it was care, the kind that came from love. But soon I realized love doesn't lock you in. It doesn't make you small. And yet I stayed, because I was raised to believe that good wives endure. The first time he hit me, it was over something so small I can't even remember now. Maybe I forgot to iron his white shirt before work, or maybe I said something he didn't like. He came home that evening angry, shouting about traffic, about a colleague, about how women never understand. I asked softly, "Have you eaten?" He turned sharply, and before I could even breathe, his hand hit my face. The sound echoed before the pain did. For a moment, we both froze. Then he dropped to his knees, shaking. "Ezinne, I'm sorry, I swear." "It's not you, it's me. Work has been hard." He started crying. I didn't even cry. I was too shocked. That night, I slept facing the wall, tasting salt and confusion. In the morning, he brought flowers and whispered, "You're my peace." And I believed him. That was my first mistake. Weeks later, it happened again. This time because the stew was too salty. Then again because I answered his phone without permission. Then again because I smiled too long at a waiter. Every time came with an apology. Every apology came with promises. And every promise came with a bigger lie. He would buy me things afterward. Jewelry, new wrappers, perfumes. Like gifts could erase pain. Sometimes he'd kiss my bruises and whisper, "You know I love you, right?" And I'd nod, even though my heart was breaking quietly inside my chest. There's a kind of silence that kills faster than a knife. The silence of living with someone who destroys you piece by piece, but tells you it's your fault. I stopped talking to my friends. They would call and say, "Ezinne, we don't see you again." "Oh," and I'd laugh and lie, Marriage has turned me to a homebody." But the truth was, Kunle didn't like me going out. He didn't like me visiting my mother. He didn't like me existing outside of him. He had become my world, a dark, suffocating world where my laughter no longer fit. Sometimes I'd stand by the window at night, watching the compound kids play outside, listening to their laughter and wondering when I last laughed like that. There was a time when I was fearless, a girl from Enugu who dreamed of owning a fashion shop and traveling the world. But the day I married Kunle, that dream was buried beneath fear and duty. He wasn't always bad. That's what made it harder. Some mornings, he'd wake up early and make breakfast. He'd hold me and say, "We'll travel soon. You'll see." And for a moment, I'd believe maybe the monster had gone away. But by evening, the monster always came back. He hated when I cried. He said my tears provoked him. So I learned to take the hits quietly. No screaming, no begging, just silence. Because the quieter I became, the faster it ended. One night after he beat me for answering his mother's call too late, I looked in the mirror and almost didn't recognize myself. My lips were swollen, my eyes puffy and my heart empty. I whispered, "This can't be love." But then I thought of my family, the wedding photos, the pastor's voice saying, "For better or worse," and I convinced myself that this was just my worse. People in our compound knew. They heard the fights, they saw the bruises, but no one said anything. Some looked at me with pity, others with judgment. I overheard one woman say, "That one no get sense. She go still stay there until he kill am." And maybe she was right, 'cause I stayed. Until that night. It was a Thursday. The moon hung low and yellow, watching from behind the clouds like a guilty witness. Kunle came home late, drunk, his shirt half buttoned and smelling of perfume that wasn't mine. I had waited up, worried, praying silently. When he walked in, I asked softly, "Kunle, where have you been?" He stopped, turned slowly. His eyes were cold, the kind that made my stomach twist. "So, you're now keeping tabs on me?" he said. I shook my head. "No, I was just—" Before I could finish, his fist met my cheek. I stumbled. He hit me again. Then again. I fell, blood in my mouth, breath in short gasps. He screamed, "You'll never talk to me like that again." I tried to crawl away, but my vision blurred. The last thing I remember was the ceiling spinning, his voice echoing in the distance. And then, silence. When I opened my eyes again, everything was dark. I felt cold metal under my back, the rumble of an engine, and the faint smell of petrol. It took me a moment to realize I was in the back seat of his car. Kunle was driving. He thought I was dead. And that was the night I stopped being a victim and started becoming a survivor. When I opened my eyes, everything was dark. Darker than any night I'd ever known. The air smelled of petrol and dust. For a moment, I couldn't move. My body felt heavy, and my head throbbed like a drum beaten by angry spirits. Then I heard the sound of tires rolling over gravel. That was when I realized I was in the back seat of Kunle's car. He was driving slowly, humming to himself. It wasn't a song, just a low, broken tune. I could hear him talking under his breath. "She brought this on herself. She forced me. She made me do it." He thought I was dead, and that thought gave me life. I lay still, eyes half closed, breathing through shallow gasps so he wouldn't notice. My body ached, my mouth tasted of blood, and my heart pounded so loud I feared he could hear it from the driver's seat. After a while, the car stopped. The door opened with a squeak. I heard crickets, 1,000 of them, and the wind brushing against tall grass. He had driven far away, somewhere near the outskirts of Kano, a place empty enough for secrets. He dragged me out by my arm. My head hit the ground. Pain shot through my neck, but I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just let my body hang loose like a rag doll. He started digging. Each strike of the shovel cut through the earth with a dull thud. The sound echoed in my bones. Between breaths, he kept muttering, "If only you had listened, Ezinne. If only you had behaved." When he finished, he dropped the shovel and stood over me, panting. He looked at my face one last time, the same face he once promised to protect, and whispered, "Goodbye." Then he pushed me in. The ground was cold and damp. I could smell the soil and hear my heartbeat in my ears. He began to cover me with sand, handful after handful. It fell on my face, my hair, my mouth. I held my breath. If I moved, if I coughed, it would all be over. When the last sound of his footsteps faded, I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5. Then I clawed upward, coughing, gasping, dragging myself out of that shallow grave like a ghost refusing to die. The moon had come out, pale and cruel. It watched me struggle, my clothes torn, my face covered in mud. I stumbled through the bush barefoot, every step slicing my skin. Mosquitoes bit, thorns tore my legs, but I kept moving. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to live. At dawn, I collapsed near a small hut at the edge of a cassava farm. An old woman and her teenage son found me. She was called Mama Hawa. She lived in that lonely hut, selling vegetables and herbs to travelers. When she saw me, she gasped, "Ya Allah, who did this to you?" I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. The boy ran to fetch water. Mama Hawa helped me inside, laid me on a raffia mat, and cleaned the wounds on my head with warm water. She looked at me and said softly, "You don't need to talk. God already knows what happened. I stayed with her for weeks." She fed me tuo and soup, covered me with her wrapper at night, and hid me whenever strangers passed. Her son Bashir called me Auntie Amara because I told them not to use my real name. Ezinne had to disappear, at least for a while. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night shaking, hearing Kunle's voice in my dreams. I'd smell the soil again, feel it on my lips. Mama Hawa would come to my mat and whisper, "You are safe, my daughter." Sleep. It took me months to believe her. One morning, while helping her at the small market, I overheard two traders talking. They mentioned a headline from the radio: "Banker's wife missing, husband pleads for her return." My heart skipped. He was pretending to be the victim. They said he went to the police, crying that I'd run away with another man. He even appeared on television, his face heavy with fake sorrow. "I just want my wife back," he said. "Please, if anyone sees Ezinne, tell her I love her." I almost laughed, but it came out as tears. The world believed him. The same man who buried me in the dark was now being comforted for his loss. But God doesn't sleep. A month later, Mama Hawa's neighbor came running with news. The maid, Blessing, had confessed. She couldn't take it anymore. She told the police that she had seen him beating me that night, and that I never left the house afterward. Inspector Adigan and his team went to our compound. They searched everywhere. Behind the water tank, near the back pit, they found part of my wrapper buried in the soil, torn, stained, and smelling of damp earth. They also found my necklace, the one Kunle bought me for our second anniversary. When the report reached the station, the story changed overnight. The public sympathy turned to suspicion. People who once called him responsible man began whispering, "Maybe he killed her." I heard all of this from the radio in Mama Hawa's hut. Each word felt like a step closer to justice. I wanted to go to the police to tell them the truth, but fear held me back. What if they didn't believe me? What if Kunle found me again? So I waited. 2 weeks later, I saw his face again, this time in handcuffs. The headline read, "Bank manager arrested for wife's murder." I fell to my knees, crying, not out of joy, but out of exhaustion. It was over. The man who once looked me in the eye and said, "No one will ever believe you," was now the one everyone was judging. He had killed me in his mind, but in truth, he had buried his own soul. That night, I stepped outside, looked up at the stars, and whispered, "God, you kept me alive for a reason. Show me why." And from that moment, I promised myself, if I ever faced Kunle again, I wouldn't face him as the broken woman he left in that grave, but as the living proof that evil never truly wins. 6 months passed before I finally gathered the courage to go home. 6 months of hiding, healing, and praying that no one would find me before I found myself again. Mama Hawa stood beside me that morning as I packed the small nylon bag she'd given me. Inside were only 2 wrappers, a pair of slippers, and a folded note she had written in Hausa. She smiled sadly. "Go, my daughter." The world thinks you are dead. Let them see that God writes better stories than man. Her words stayed in my heart as I boarded a rickety bus heading to Enugu, my home. Every bump on the road made me flinch. Every time a man spoke too loudly, my hands trembled. But beneath all the fear, there was something new: strength. When I stepped off the bus, I felt the air hit my face like a whisper from home. The scent of roasted corn and rain-soaked dust filled my lungs. My legs shook as I walked through my old street. People stared, not recognizing me. I looked thinner, older, like a ghost wearing Ezinne's face. When I reached my mother's gate, I froze. I could hear her voice inside, humming softly to a gospel tune on the radio. I knocked. Once. Twice. When she opened the door and saw me standing there, she screamed and collapsed. I ran to her crying, "Mama!" "It's me. It's Ezinne. I'm home." Her hands trembled as she touched my face. "Jesus, Jesus. My daughter, is it really you?" I nodded, tears flooding my eyes. "I didn't die, Mama." He thought I did, but God said no. We held each other for what felt like eternity. She wept like a mother seeing her child born again. Neighbors rushed in, gasping in disbelief. "Ezinne?" "But they said your husband." "Yes," I said softly. "They said many things. But only God knew the truth." That evening, I told my mother everything. Every slap, every bruise, every night of fear, and the night he tried to bury me alive. She sat silently, her eyes glistening with tears, her fists clenched. When I finished, she said only one thing: "God hid you from death because he has a purpose for your pain." 2 days later, news spread through Enugu that I was alive. It reached Kano, and then it reached him, Kunle. The same man who buried me now sat in a prison cell, accused of my murder. When the police found out I was alive, they sent for me immediately. Inspector Adigan himself couldn't believe it. When he saw me walk into the station, his jaw dropped. "Madam, you're alive?" "Yes," I replied, "and I'm here to finish my story." He smiled faintly. "Then let justice be done." The trial began 3 weeks later. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, neighbors, strangers, everyone wanted to see the woman who came back from the dead. As I walked to the witness stand, all eyes followed me. My hands shook, but my heart was calm. When they brought Kunle in, my breath caught for a second. He looked nothing like the man I once loved. His hair had grown wild, his eyes red from sleepless nights. When his eyes met mine, he froze. "Ezinne?" he whispered, voice trembling. "It can't be you. You're dead." I looked him straight in the eyes and said quietly, "No, Kunle. I'm not dead. But the man I married is—" The room fell silent. Even the judge paused. For once, he had no power over me. No raised voice, no clenched fist. Just a broken man facing the woman he thought he destroyed. As the evidence was read, the maid's testimony, the forensic report, the buried clothes, his tears began to fall. He cried. He begged. He shouted that it was a mistake. But it was too late. When the judge finally said the words, "life imprisonment," I didn't feel joy. I didn't clap. I just breathed deeply, freely, for the first time in years. Justice doesn't erase pain, but it reminds the world that truth always rises from the grave. After the trial, I visited the small grave where he had left me that night. It was now just a patch of wild grass behind an abandoned house. I knelt there and whispered, "You didn't bury me, Kunle. You buried your own soul." Then I took off my wedding ring and dropped it into the soil. That day marked the real end of our marriage. When I returned to Enugu, I couldn't sleep for weeks. Every sound still made me flinch. But slowly, with time, I began to heal. Mama would sit with me on the veranda each evening, holding my hand and humming hymns. "Cry if you must. she would say, but never lose your smile again. One afternoon, I visited the church near our old street. I lit a candle and whispered a prayer. Lord, if you kept me alive, let it not be in vain. Use me to help others who are still trapped where I was. That prayer became my purpose. Months later, with the help of a few kind-hearted women, I started a small foundation called the House of Dawn. We sheltered women escaping abuse, those with bruised faces, broken ribs, and shattered hope. I listened to their stories and shared mine. When they cried, I held them and said, I know. I've been there. When they said, I can't leave him, I replied, you can. I did. Each woman who walked out of darkness reminded me why I survived. Sometimes I still wake up at night hearing his voice in my dreams. But when I open my eyes and see the faces of women and children I've helped, I know I'm exactly where God wants me to be. If you're listening to my story now, maybe you're in a place where your heart is bruised and your body is tired. Please hear me. Love that hurts isn't love. Love doesn't bruise your skin or silence your spirit. Love doesn't bury you and call it care. I am Ezinne, the woman who came back from her own grave. And I am living proof that pain doesn't have the final word. Survival does. Because sometimes God lets the storm rage, not to destroy you, but to prove that you can still stand when it's over.